All right, I think we're going here. So WordPress is what is the system that allows us to serve up these dynamic web pages. Um, and let's take a look at the WordPress file system. We did this briefly yesterday. So I'm going into my localhost folder, whatever that is, going into my WordPress install, which is jterm wp-content. I'm going to look in the themes folder. I'm going to go into my ultra lightweight. And we looked at this before. I'm going to show you a little trick for those of you that are using TextMate, and I'm sure other text editors do this too, but this is the only one that I know how to. What you can do is you can take the entire ultra lightweight folder, or any folder for that matter, and just drag it into TextMate. And what happens is that when it opens up the folder. So I see that I have my directory here with all the files, and then I'll have my editing window over here. So when I click on index, it's over here, and if I need to switch over to something else, so if I'm working with a lot of different documents at once, it's nice because I can just have them all open and just tab them over instead of having a bunch of different windows open and have to navigate between my TextMate, my Finder, and all sorts of different windows. Okay. So we talked a little bit about this. We talked about the the header, the sidebar, this content, and the footer. But let's talk a little bit about what exactly is this language, and I'm going to go through this similarly to the way that we did HTML. And probably the best way is this. So PHP stands for Personal Homepage, and it was made by just a single dude who decided that he needed a way to make a dynamic website for his own personal website back in 1995 when something like this didn't exist. So he wrote an entire new language just to do this, which is pretty crazy. But PHP, let me turn this to HTML. You can recognize PHP because it will always open with an angle bracket, and then directly after the angle bracket, you'll get a question mark, and then it'll say PHP. So I'm going to spread those apart a little bit. So this is anything inside of these markers here, you will know is PHP. Anything before or after is not PHP. So if I write hello world, hello and world is just text, but whatever is in here is not. So let me delete this here and this.
So your text editor is set to PHP?
I have it set to HTML right now. It can be to either. I think HTML will be a little bit better for us right now. Try going language, and then yeah. Here you go.
Where is that? Sorry.
Are you using which? TextMate. If you go down to the bottom here, there's this little tab. It's really hard to see on the screen, and there are a bunch of different options. There should be, on most editors, you can find a menu item called language or something like that, and you can just scroll down and find your appropriate language. It's good because it highlights specific syntax items and makes it easier for you to see what you're coding.
Then it should be saved as .html?
No. So if you have PHP in your document, instead of saving it as a .html, you're going to want to save it as a .php. Let me start my timer again. And let me do this right now. So I'm just going to save this right now. This is has just one single PHP tag. I'm going to save this in my first page again. So I'm going to do my first PHP. Also, a brief word about naming files that you're going to be putting on the internet. Don't include any spaces. If you need to have a space or something, I would recommend putting a dash in place of a space. But spaces just do not work for addressing. So I'm going to do that instead of spaces. And also, you can do any combination of uppercase or lowercase, but I think it's easier mostly if you just leave everything all lowercase. But that's personal preference. I don't think underscore is recommended. I think it'll work, but I wouldn't do it. And don't put if you put a dash in or a slash, any kind of slash or star, or there are a few different characters that you can put in there, and those are reserved characters because the dash, when the browser is reading that, it'll read that as a new folder or as a new directory. The star and all these other things have meaning. So stick to basic characters and just know that if something breaks, first thing is take a look at your file names and make sure that they're correct too. Okay, so my first php.php, going to save that, and I'm going to open up MAMP. I'm going to stop the service just to show you something. So I've turned off my server on MAMP. You don't necessarily have to. So I'm going to navigate to my first page. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop this my first PHP right into my browser. So I'm going to try and look at it like I did my HTML file. And when I do it, I first see that it doesn't want to go into either Firefox or Safari. It just won't take it. If I just make it though, you see what happens if I go to this. So I'm going to open up my PHP here. And what happens, it says, okay, this is just a text file, I don't know what to do with it. So you can download it, you can open it. It doesn't know what to do with this PHP file by default. And this is why we need the server. So I'm going to go back to MAMP. I'm going to restart my server. So I got my server running. Now I should be able to do the same thing and open up my first PHP in here, right? Not quite. So again, it doesn't know what to do with that because it says the PHP file, what gives. So this is what you have to do. I can't save my PHP in there. I have to save it in my localhost folder. It has to actually be on my server or in a folder inside my localhost or www if you're on WAMP. So I'm just going to copy this over here. I'm going to open it up. Close this one. So if you had that first one open and you're copying it over, close the old one in your text editor and open it again in the new location. So like, yeah, don't put it in JTerm. Put it in outside. Yeah. So it'll be at the same level as JTerm. And this is all it is. I'm going to take this now, and I'm going to go back to, Firefox. Now I'm going to go to Open. I'm going to navigate to my localhost folder, and I'm going to see that I'm going to find that PHP, my first PHP that I just copied into my localhost folder. And I'm going to hit open. Ugh. Let me try this. Oh, this is a problem. Okay, so I need to go to, instead of dropping it in, opening it in Firefox, I'm going to go to localhost. And I'm going to navigate the folder this way. So I see I've got my JTerm folder, which contains WordPress. And then I have this, my first php.php that I just dropped in. Now I'm going to click on that. And I'm no longer getting any errors. But it's blank. So let's just test this out real quick. I'm going to go hello world. Outside of the PHP tags. Save that. Go back to WordPress. Refresh. So here we go. It's not giving me any complaints, but this is no better so far than just the HTML file which I was building yesterday. So at least we know that works. So let's do the PHP version of Hello World. So inside the PHP tags which we have, make this bigger. I'm going to add I'm going to say echo, and then in quotation marks, single or double, doesn't matter, they just have to be the same. Echo, hello world. And I'm going to put a semicolon after that. That's just good practice after every line in PHP. And then I'm just going to save, go back to Firefox, refresh. And there we go. It says hello world. If I look at the source, all it says is hello world. So, you know, it's doing something. Let me just make it different from last one. Make sure we're not caching it or something. I'll add some exclamation points. Refresh it. There they are.
Should we just
Mhm.
go forward? I'm Notepad++.
Yeah.
And it has the PHP question mark in the right.
Mm-hmm.
Is that an error?
No, that should be. It just depends on the text editor and the settings that you have.
Okay.
What colors, what things are what colors.
So I'm not getting the hello world showing up.
Okay. I mean, that's correct. Is it saved as a
No,
PHP?
right? Are you
Yeah,
here?
mine just says JTerm.
Yeah.
PHP.
Yeah, it's there.
And it's saved in your www
Save,
folder.
put
Okay, now go back out to go to your Firefox and go to localhost. So in order to access your files, you really have to go to localhost first.
What if it's not showing up in our local host?
If it's not showing up in your localhost, it means you haven't saved it or copied it to the correct folder.
It is there though. It's in the same folder
Yeah,
as JTerm.
It is? Okay, let me take a look at it. So we've got localhost now down here.
Yeah, just put that together.
Try just typing in the name of the file. This is the file called.
Oh, right.
Okay.
Okay, so it's on
No,
the local host.
that was that. Okay, so we're just gonna do.
It's the
It's
same
in
folder.
here.
Okay.
This file.
Okay.
Then my local host it just shows.
Oh, so this only shows folders. I wonder if you can disable this. Anyway, go up here, add, just type in. You'll have to manually type in.
Type in the name of the file.
Yeah, and
Do I put the .php? Which is on
yes, .php. And I don't know if there's a way in WAMP to disable that
So it
start
looks
page.
here.
Yeah, because that's the default view. They've clearly changed something about how it works.
Yeah.
Was Tanya's not working? Yeah, she is. Oh, it is working. Anyone else having problems so far?
For some reason, local hosting thing.
Try localhost 80. some don't need them. So yeah, it's working now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it should be here.
No, so this is the ramp. It doesn't show you the same thing that the default do. So for now, you're just going to have to type in the file
It is
and
emergency.
include the .php.
That's what everybody said.
Everybody says.
That's what people were saying.
Okay.
I can't.
So everyone else, everyone good?
So fun. I have to go to the could be more snow.
So you're editing.
Snowman
No, you are. You're in Word. You need to be in a text editor. Yes. So this is an important thing. When you're editing these documents, PHP, HTML, any sort of scripting language, you can't use a word processor, and the reason is because a word processor doesn't just save the text; it saves a lot of different formatting things, like bold. It has a bunch of hidden things that you never see embedded in it, and so when you try and run that as an HTML file or a PHP file, it just doesn't work. So, and that's why text editor is a must. Now, in a pinch, you can use the default like TextEdit or Notepad or whatever comes installed by default in your system, but that doesn't give you any formatting. Somebody else was having a problem with it not tabbing, so it's good. There are a lot of free options, so I would definitely have one of those. Okay, so is that okay so far?
Yeah.
Just catch up. Okay, so we have a super simple, the simplest thing here. Now, I'm going to show you how this can start working with HTML before we go any crazier. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say, I'm going to make an HTML document, just like we did yesterday. I'm going to add the head. And I'm going to leave the hello world in the body. And I'm going to put it in a p tag. Okay, so this is basically what we had yesterday, but I've got this new little chunk of PHP stuck in there. I'll leave that up for a minute. Let me make this a little smaller. Is it still okay if it's this big? Okay. The P, that's the paragraph tag, so that's the one we use for the blocks of text. Just as a note, like you don't want to use like a P tag for like a headline or something that you want just a couple words. You want it for like a chunk of text. Actually, I'm going to change this, and we'll learn a new tag. I'm going to change this P tag to an H1 tag. So when I change that, I also have to change the closing tag to H1. H stands for headline, and then 1 is just the size, and you can do 1 through 6, and they're all different sizes. Refresh.
So does that have to then be saved now as an HTML file instead of a PHP?
No. So you'll notice when we refresh, it's still my first php.php. And you've probably seen these all around the web. I think, all sorts of websites use PHP files, and whenever you see that, you know that something on that web page is actually being processed through this language, PHP. So this is really simple. Let's talk about a couple different ways that we can use PHP, or different ways that PHP is used. So let's see. I'm going to give myself a little bit of space. I'm going to move these onto different lines, and you can do this. So it's exactly the same as the element tags. I can just spread these out, and now anything inside, anything still in between these lines is still PHP. It doesn't matter if they're returns or spaces or tabs. So I'm going to change this from echo to, I'm going to say, cache there, or greeting.
What does echo mean?
Echo is the same as like print. It just says to print out this, whatever comes after echo. And it's just the PHP terminology for print. So I'm doing, you see this new little thing. I've replaced echo with this greeting with this little cache sign in front of the $sign in front of it. And this cache sign means that this is a variable. So all variables in PHP start with the cache sign. Now, if you don't plan on writing a lot of PHP, which is fine, this is still extremely useful to know, because you'll see a lot of these in places, and you'll see that, oh, this is variable, it's pulling information from somewhere else. So in this case, I'm just saying this variable greeting, set that equal to hello world. And because this hello world is in quotation marks, it knows that it's a string, or just, a number of letters that are put together, in this case hello world. Now at the end of this line, after the end of every line, you need to have a semicolon, because otherwise PHP doesn't know when to stop evaluating greeting. So it doesn't know if I leave this out and I put something else, dog food, it'll say, okay, am I supposed to set it to hello world or dog food? And there's no real connector here, so it doesn't know what to do anyway. It would just break. So, okay, so I have this first line greeting hello world, and now I'm just going to put back my echo, like we had before, and I'm going to say echo, and instead of hello world, I'm going to say echo greeting, and put the semicolon behind it. Save that, and I'm going to go back to Firefox, refresh it. And nothing changed if you did it right. Let's go back in. I'm just going to change this. And I've just changed the text here. I haven't changed anything else. And there we go. So, we could have done this in one line, but this is just to show you this is the variable. It stores this information. This information can also be a number, for example. We'll make it the meaning of life. And it displays the number instead. And the numbers don't need quotation marks. All right, I'm going to go through a couple other, programming things, and we won't necessarily have to go too deep into them, but they're things that will be important for our near future. So let's leave this greeting, Hola Mundo. I'm going to delete this echo string for now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, I really love hearing this Hola Mundo over and over again. So I could actually type in echo greeting and copy and paste that and just get like really stoked and go back, and then there we go. So I've got that like a million times, well, 5 times. But this is kind of sloppy because I am saying the same thing. I've just copy and pasted that thing, 4 times when I really kind of, and what if I wanted to actually say it, 100 times or only 2 times? There's a good way to do that. So what I'm going to do, delete that, go back. Right after greeting, I'm going to write a loop. And this is something, just a chunk of code that will be iterated over a certain number of times. So what I'm going to say is for, which is the word for just saying do something for a certain number of times. I'm just going to write this out real quick, and then I'll talk about what it is. Okay. So here, after my greeting variable is declared, I have this little for statement. Directly after the for, we have this open parentheses. We have this whole statement in parentheses. Now you have to make sure that the parentheses are open and closed, just like you have to do for any other tag. And it takes 3 different items. You have to have exactly 3 different things inside this for little guy. So the first one, this looks familiar. This looks, has the cash sign up here, the dollar sign. I'm saying, starting a variable called I, which I guess stands for iterator, and I'm setting that to 0. So I'm just saying, make a variable I, start it at 0. Then the next one says, how far do you want to count to? So in this case, I'm saying this is the stopping condition. Is what it. So it says when I equals 10, or as long as I is less than 10, keep going. So as soon as it gets to this point, it says I is equal to 10 or greater than 10, it'll stop. And this will be a little more clear in a second. And then it says the third thing that it needs is how far does it go up each time. So in this case, this is just shorthand. This I++ is shorthand for I equals I plus 1. So, and then followed by these curly braces, which are open and closed. Now, let me try and explain this another way, because I've done a pretty poor job of it. So, what we're doing here is I'm going to write something, a little piece of code that we've seen before. I'm going to say, so this is my code that I want to iterate over. This is what I want to do over and over again instead of copying and pasting. And I've put that inside these curly braces. And before these curly braces, I say this is how many times I'm going to do it. So I have this counter, this iterator, which I set to 0. I say as long as this thing is equal to 0 or less than 10, keep going. And then I say every time I do this, add 1 to I automatically. So it goes through this. It says it starts printing. It prints my greeting, and then it goes back. It adds 1. Makes sure that still meets the condition of being less than 10. If it does, then it goes back and does it again, and then comes back it adds 1, then looks at the condition, says, is it under 10? If it is, if it's not under 10, then it says, okay, I guess we're done here, and then it skips past to the end and just exits the loop. So I'm going to just give this a shot real quick. Refresh. And we've got a bunch more Hola Mundos. And you can do this as many times as you want. You can just change this number behind I to whatever to an arbitrary number. Another thing you can do, instead of saying just iterating by 1 each time, say it goes up to 20, but I only want to do it in increments of 3. So I equals I plus 3. Well, let's make it 2 so we can divide easily. So instead of getting 20, I'll actually get 10, which is the same as I had before. Or 22, which will give me 1 more than I had before. So you're going to see a lot of loops. Well, maybe not a lot of loops, but WordPress does have, you will need to work with a loop and at least recognize it and be able to see where it begins with the for and see where it ends with this curly brace. And understand that anything that's inside those curly braces will be repeated a certain number of times. Change this, put that back to plus plus, this 5. Okay, so this is a good point to talk about, putting strings together or putting words together. Let's say I have a bunch of different. I split my variables up, and I'm going to make a new variable up at the top. I'm going to call it place. So I have 2 variables now, one called greeting, one called place. And so now that you see, if I save that and refresh it, instead of saying Hola Mundo, it just says Hola a bunch of times, the same number without the Mundo. So we've lost that. Now, what if you want to stick those together? Now you could just obviously have made them 1, but we're going to do this. In the echo line, inside the loop, I'm going to kind of glue those 2 together, concatenate the 2. And the way that's done in PHP is I'm just going to put a period. The spaces don't matter, I just do that because it's easier to see. Put period, and then I'm going to add in my place variable. Save that. Refresh it. So there we go, it's back. So just know that when you see a bunch of things connected with these periods in between them, that it means that it's just kind of like joining them together. And let's talk about special characters. So this Hola Mundo, is just showing up all in one line, and it's just wrapping when it hits the end, which is not desirable because I like my Hola Mundos to be given to me one at a time on a line, 1 per line. So I'm going to do something that I just learned. I'm going to put a little joiner here at the end, and I'm going to add onto the string, or add another string. I'm going to put a /n. Can everyone see that? So I've put that as text, and it should come up as, looks like it's just text, but when I refresh it, it does not what I thought it was going to do. I don't think it's a backslash, is it? No. One moment. Okay, so I guess these have to be. Let me just try this out real quick. I may not have the answer to why this is not working right now. Anyway, what's supposed to happen is you're supposed to get a new line. Anyway, we'll just push past that because that's not super important. But I don't know why that's the problem.
The same code you do.
Well, I have a space here. You must be missing a space here. Okay, so I know I have a way to put this all into their own lines. So let's say I want to make a list. So we had HTML lists yesterday. We went into them briefly yesterday. Let's do this. So I'm going to say inside this h1 tag, I am going to say I'm going to start a list. So UL, and right before the close h1 tag, I'm going to close the UL. UL stands for unordered list. Now, what I want to do is I want to make each greeting its own list item. So inside this loop, I'm going to say echo, and I'm going to echo list item. Now this is HTML, but we're saying it's a string because it's inside the quotation marks. And I'm going to have to balance it also by putting a close li. So there we go. What it's going to do is it's going to write all this stuff. The browser will write all these, the HTML, the head, body, the h1, ul, and then it's going to get to this PHP and it's going to say, okay, what do I do? The greeting is equal to hola, place is equal to mundo. And then it's going to say, okay, I've got this loop. Do this 5 times. And so it's going to write to the source list item, and then after list item, it's going to write our hola mundo because we know that from up here and from before, and then it's going to write close the list item, and it's going to do that 5 times, exit, and then it's going to write the rest of these. So I'm going to save that, refresh it. And there we go. So we have a list. And if we look at the source, all that stuff is gone. All the PHP is gone, and all we see is the. What do you need to? What do you need? Right there. Let me take this opportunity to stop the recording.